This is Learning with Coach History. Hey everyone, this is the third of 4 lessons on imperialism. Today is acquiring new lands. In this lesson, you'll learn how the United States continued its imperialism. The key terms and people: Foraker Act, the Platt Amendment, Protectorate, Emilio Aguinaldo, John Hay, the Open Door Notes, and the Boxer Rebellion. Puerto Rico had become an American territory as the result of the Spanish-American War. American forces landed in Puerto Rico in July of 1898. The commanding officer declared that the Americans were there to protect the Puerto Ricans. But other U.S. military officials insulted the Puerto Ricans. They spoke to them as children and set limits on their personal freedom. Many Puerto Ricans began to resent the military government. Puerto Rico was strategically important to the United States, both for maintaining a U.S. presence in the Caribbean and for protecting a future canal that American leaders wanted to build across the Isthmus of Panama. In 1900, Congress passed the Foraker Act that ended military rule in Puerto Rico and set up a civil government. The act gave the President of the United States the power to appoint Puerto Rico's governor and members of the upper house of its legislature. Puerto Ricans could elect only the members of the lower house. The United States kept strict control over the Puerto Rican people and their government. In 1917, Congress made Puerto Ricans U.S. citizens. It also gave them the right to elect both houses of their legislature. In regards to Cuba, the question is, how would the U.S. keep control over Cuba? Cuba was officially independent after the war. The U.S. Army, however, remained in Cuba for 4 years. It punished Cubans who did not like this American occupation. In 1900, the new Cuban government wrote a constitution. The U.S. insisted that they add the Platt Amendment. The amendment limited Cubans' rights in dealing with other countries. It gave the U.S. special privileges, including the right to intervene to preserve order. Cuba became a U.S. protectorate, a country whose affairs are partially controlled by a stronger power. The U.S. insisted on these rights because of its economic interests in Cuba's sugar, tobacco, and mining industries. Moving on to the Philippines, why did the Filipinos rebel against the United States? Filipinos had been fighting for independence for years. They were angry that the U.S. had annexed their islands. Rebel leader Emilio Aguinaldo believed that the U.S. had betrayed the Filipinos after helping them win independence. The rebels believed that the U.S. was doing the same thing Spain had done, which was imposing its authority and infringing on the freedom of the people. In 1899, Aguinaldo started a rebellion, which lasted 3 years. After winning the Philippine-American War, the U.S. set up a government similar to the one that had set up in Cuba. The U.S. had some interest in China as well. By 1899, many countries had economic interest in China. The U.S. wanted to be able to trade with China. China was seen as a vast potential market for American products. The Secretary of State, John Hay, sent a series of policy statements to the leaders of other nations proposing that the nations share their trading rights with the U.S. His policy statements were called the Open Door Notes. They called for China's ports to remain open and for China to remain independent. No country would have special trading rights. The other countries agreed. Although China kept its freedom, Europeans dominated most of China's cities. In 1900, a secret society in China started a rebellion protesting the influence of Western countries. This group was known as the Boxers because members practiced martial arts. Troops from many countries, including the US, fought against these Chinese rebels. After the Boxer Rebellion was defeated, the US issued more open door notes to make sure that other countries did not try to make colonies in China. How did Americans feel about US imperialism? Well, President William McKinley was reelected in 1900. His opponent had been an anti imperialist, William Jennings Bryan. The outcome of the election suggests that most Americans disagreed with Bryan. Imperialism was popular. Before McKinley was reelected, an anti imperialist league formed. The league included some prominent Americans: former President Grover Cleveland, industrial leader Andrew Carnegie, labor leader Samuel Gompers, social worker Jane Addams, and author Mark Twain. They all had different reasons for being against imperialism. For example, Gompers was concerned about the impact of imperialism on U.S. workers. Carnegie worried that U.S. imperialism would lead to endless wars with European countries. But all anti imperialist league members agreed it was wrong for the U.S. to rule other people without their consent.